This is the VVM podcast, where artificial intelligence meets the forefront of human curiosity.
All right, so you want to know about colonizing Mars, huh? Well, today we're going deep on this into all the research about it.
We're talking about turning science fiction into reality, like a lot of people think about it, but this is real stuff we're looking at.
We're talking about transforming Mars, which, let's face it, is a pretty hostile place, into somewhere humans could actually live.
Yeah, a potential second home for humanity. Sounds crazy, right?
Kind of does, but the thing is, this isn't just a dream anymore. It's not just sci-fi.
Oh yeah, space agencies, private companies, they're actively working on Mars colonization plans right now.
Like SpaceX. They're not just messing around with short visits either.
Nope, we're talking permanent settlements. The real deal.
SpaceX is already building Starship. You probably heard of it. That fully reusable spacecraft designed for Mars missions.
And get this, the UAE has a plan to establish a Mars settlement by 2117.
2117? I mean, that's amazing.
That's in our lifetime. Well, maybe not yours and mine, but...
Definitely someone listening's lifetime. Okay, so lots of cool plans, but let's be real. Mars is not exactly welcoming.
You got that right. Thin atmosphere, freezing temperatures, and did I mention the radiation? And that toxic dust. We're going to need more than a good spacesuit to make this work.
Way more. I mean, humans can barely survive a trip to the top of Mount Everest. How are we going to just show up and thrive on Mars?
That's the big question, right? We evolved here on Earth. Our bodies just aren't built for Mars.
Right. And there's no global magnetic field, which means the surface is just bombarded with harmful radiation from the sun and, well, everywhere else in space.
Exactly. So you can forget stepping outside for a stroll without a special pressurized suit and a habitat that can actually protect you.
And then there's the journey itself. 9 months. 9 months crammed inside a spaceship.
Bombarded by radiation, stuck with the same people.
Dealing with all that psychological stress. The isolation, the confinement.
Tough stuff. And that's just one way. Coming back is another 9 months. So, it's really a multi-year commitment.
It makes you wonder, how will they ever make it feel like home? How can you make somewhere that's so hostile feel livable?
And how do you pick the right people? I mean, you'd have to consider the psychological and emotional well-being of the crew.
You're right. They talk about that in the research, like isolation, being stuck in that tiny space, communication delays with Earth, and just what happens when people are pushed to their limits.
Conflicts are bound to happen. And imagine trying to work through a fight with a crewmate when it takes 20 minutes for a message to get to Earth and back.
Oh, man. You'd have to really carefully select that crew, like top-notch training, conflict resolution skills, all that.
Absolutely. I mean, if something like that went wrong, it could totally derail the mission, even if everything else went perfectly.
No kidding. Okay, so we've covered the trip, the landing, and now even just surviving there. But what about resources? We need to eat.
Right. Water's scarce, the soil is toxic, and growing food. Forget about it. It'll be a huge challenge. I mean, how are you going to live off the land when the land is actively trying to kill you?
Exactly. So I'm really curious, how are they even thinking about tackling that?
Well, they're looking at some pretty cool stuff like in situ resource utilization, ISRU for short.
ISRU. So basically using what's already there on Mars to make what we need.
Yeah,
clever.
Exactly. Not just food either. Water, oxygen, building materials, even fuel. It's all on the table.
I mean, that sounds like... Is that even possible? Seems like a lot to figure out.
It's definitely ambitious, but they're working on it.
Okay, so we've got the trip, the living situation, even some ideas about resources. But what about the bigger picture, the ethics of all this?
Yeah, there are a lot of ethical questions here, and we need answers. Like, do we even have the right to colonize another planet?
What if there's already life there, even microbial life?
Exactly. And then if we do set up a colony, how do we make it fair? How do we ensure a just society on Mars?
It's a lot to think about. And some experts are even worried about, totalitarian regimes forming because of the harsh conditions.
Oh, yeah, that's a real possibility. You can imagine trying to survive on Mars, power could get concentrated, and individual liberties could be, they could disappear.
We're trying to escape problems on Earth, not recreate them on Mars.
Exactly. Yeah. So we need to be really careful, really thoughtful about how we plan these settlements.
Okay, so it's clear colonizing Mars It's way more than just building a rocket and blasting off.
Way more. There are so many interconnected challenges, from the technology to the ethics to just figuring out how to build a new society. It's mind-boggling.
I mean, are there people who think it's just not worth it? All this risk, all this effort, for what?
Yeah, there are definitely people who say we should focus on fixing things here on Earth first.
Yeah, before spending all this time and money on a risky venture on another planet. I mean, I can see that side of it.
And some people even call it a delusion. They think we should just send robots to explore Mars and leave humans out of it.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we've talked about how exciting it would be, but also all these massive challenges. What's the next step?
I think we have to acknowledge that colonizing Mars, this is a long game. It's a journey that'll take decades, maybe even centuries.
So we're talking generations. Wow.
And it's going to take incredible planning, countries working together, and a deep understanding of the ethical and societal implications. This is a big deal.
It's not just about getting to Mars, but what we do once we're there.
Absolutely. We have to figure out what kind of society we want on Mars.
Like, will it be a reflection of the best parts of humanity? Will we create a utopia?
Or are we just going to repeat the same mistakes we've made here? That's what we have to figure out if we want to do this right.
It seems like there's a lot more to dig into here.
Oh, we're just getting started.
Maybe we can take a closer look at some of these challenges, like the technical hurdles, the psychological challenges, the ethics.
Let's do it. Next time, we'll go even deeper.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into some of those technical challenges. We talked about getting to Mars, but what about actually setting up a colony, a place where people can live? Yeah, I mean, Mars is basically trying to kill you, right?
Yeah.
So how do we make that not happen?
Right. Habitat design is absolutely key. We're talking about structures that can handle everything Mars throws at us. Radiation, extreme temperatures, those dust storms.
And the low atmospheric pressure. I mean, it's not exactly Earth-like.
Nope, not at all. So we need habitats that are tough, sealed tight, and the current thinking is to use a modular approach.
Modular. Like prefab houses or something.
Exactly. Think of it like giant Lego sets for Martian colonists. These modules are built on Earth, shipped to Mars.
And then assembled on site. Clever.
It makes things a lot easier. And as the colony grows, you just add more modules, connect them up.
So you could have living spaces, labs, workshops.
Greenhouses, even. It's all about being flexible, adapting to the needs of the colony.
Speaking of greenhouses, how are we going to grow food on a planet with toxic soil? Yeah. And not much sunlight.
That's where things get really interesting. Remember ISRU? Using what's already on Mars to make what you need.
Right. Got to make the most of what you got.
Exactly. We can't just rely on shipping everything from Earth. It's not sustainable. So we have to figure out how to grow food on Mars.
It's like Matt Damon in The Martian, right? Growing potatoes in Martian soil.
Kind of, but we'll need to be a bit more sophisticated. The problem is Martian soil has these things called perchlorates, and they're toxic to us.
So just planting seeds in the ground is not an option.
Not really. So we're looking at other techniques like hydroponics.
Hydroponics. Isn't that like growing plants in water without soil?
You got it. It's super efficient. You can control the environment, maximize yields, and you don't need much space. Perfect for Mars.
And then there's aeroponics, right, where the plant roots are just hanging in the air and they get sprayed with nutrients.
Yep, another great option. We're basically bringing Earth's best farming tech to Mars.
Makes sense, but even with all that, don't we still need sunlight? Mars doesn't get as much as Earth.
That's true, so we'll have to supplement it with artificial lighting.
Like grow lights.
Exactly. LED grow lights are perfect because they're energy efficient and you can fine-tune them to give plants the exact wavelengths of light they need.
So we're basically creating these totally artificial ecosystems inside the habitats.
Yeah, closed-loop systems that recycle water, air, even waste products. It's like building a miniature biosphere.
Sounds amazing, but also super complex and expensive. How do we even make something like that a reality?
Well, that's where ISRU comes back into play. The more we can use resources that are already on Mars, the less we have to ship from Earth.
Which makes it cheaper and more sustainable.
Exactly. Okay, so we've landed, built our habitat, figured out food. What about other essentials like water, oxygen, power?
Yeah, those seem pretty important. How do we get those on Mars?
Well, luckily Mars has a decent amount of water, mostly frozen as ice. We can extract that, purify it, use it for drinking.
And what about oxygen?
We can actually make oxygen from water through a process called electrolysis. We split the water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. Boom, breathable air.
So water really is liquid gold on Mars.
You got it. And we can even use that hydrogen to make rocket fuel.
Wait, rocket fuel from water. How does that work?
It's pretty cool. We use electricity to split those water molecules. hydrogen for fuel, oxygen for breathing.
Amazing. So what about power? Can we just use solar panels like we do on Earth?
Solar energy is definitely an option, but Mars gets less sunlight than Earth. Plus, those dust storms can block out the sun for weeks.
Yeah, that's not ideal. So solar's not enough on its own. What else is there?
Nuclear power is looking like a good bet. Compact, efficient, and dust storms don't bother it.
I can already hear people saying, nuclear power on Mars, that sounds risky.
There are always risks, but modern reactor designs are super safe, and the benefits in this situation are huge.
Right, reliable power no matter what. But it's definitely something we need to consider carefully.
Absolutely weigh the risks and benefits. But this all goes to show we're not just building a base on Mars, we're building a whole new technological ecosystem.
Just as complex as what we have here on Earth.
If not more so. And that's just the technical side. We haven't even touched on the psychological challenges of living on Mars.
Or the ethics of potentially changing a pristine alien world. Or what kind of society we even want to build there.
Yeah, there's a lot more to discuss. But that's for another time.
Okay, so we've talked about the tech, the habitats, all that. But what about the people? What's it actually going to be like to live on Mars? Millions of miles from Earth. No quick trips home.
It's going to be unlike anything we've ever experienced. I mean, the isolation alone.
Yeah, you're stuck in this habitat, same small group of people, year after year.
And that communication delay. Forget about having a normal phone call with someone back home.
It really drives home how far away you are, doesn't it?
Big time. And all that, it takes a toll. The research talks about stress, anxiety, depression, even.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what about conflict? You're with these people 24/7. Even if you're best friends, that's got to be tough.
Absolutely. Being in that kind of high-pressure environment, conflicts are inevitable.
Yeah.
And resolving them, that's not going to be easy.
So astronaut training, it's not just about the physical stuff, right?
No way. The psychological preparation, that's going to be key. Resilience, both individually and as a team.
Picking the right crew, that's critical, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And we need to figure out how to support them once they're there. How do you provide therapy when there's a 20-minute delay?
Right. You can't exactly have a real-time conversation.
We're going to need to give them the tools to manage their own well-being on site.
Like sending a therapist to Mars along with everyone else.
Something like that, yeah. And then there are the physical challenges, too. Lower gravity, that could have long-term effects on bone density and muscle mass.
And the radiation. That's a big one, right?
Huge. We're going to need to figure out ways to protect them. Maybe new exercise routines, special diets, who knows?
Or even artificial gravity environments in the habitats. I've heard people talk about that.
Could be. But yeah, this is a medical and psychological endeavor as much as it is technological.
Okay, so let's say we get all that right. We have a thriving Martian colony. But then, is it even ethical? Do we have the right to just colonize another planet?
That's the million-dollar question. And there's no easy answer.
Some people say humans, we're explorers, it's in our nature.
It's the next step in our evolution. That's one way to look at it.
But what about the other side? Like, are we just imposing ourselves on a world that's not ours?
Cosmic imperialism, some people call it.
And what if there's life there, even microbes? Do we have a right to disrupt that?
It's tricky. We have to proceed carefully. Think about the ethics of it all.
Develop guidelines, right, for exploration and for colonization?
Right. We can't just go in and do whatever we want. We have to find a balance.
And then what kind of society do we want to build? Is this a chance to do things better, to create a utopia?
Or are we just going to take all our problems with us to Mars? Baggage and all.
It feels like a huge responsibility. And the decisions we make now will have consequences for generations to come.
No doubt about it. This is about the future of humanity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to really think about?
I think the biggest question is, if we can solve all these problems, what kind of future do we want on Mars? One that benefits all of humanity, or just a select few?
Are we going to respect this new world or just exploit it?
Those are tough questions, but we have to ask them if we're serious about taking this leap.
A lot to think about, for
It's
sure.
just the beginning of the conversation.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Mars colonization. Fascinating stuff. We can't wait to see what the future holds. Until next time.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the future. Remember, the world is changing faster than ever, and together, we're here to explore what's next. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share VVM Pod with a fellow explorer. Have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep looking to the stars.